It started with the kind of knock on the door that immediately sets your nerves on edge. A firm, insistent pounding that echoed through the cabin. HOA Karen had decided it was her turn to escalate matters. This time, she wasn't just making threats or trying to enforce her imagined rules. No, she had called the cops on me, convinced that some minor technicality in my property gave her the right to involve law enforcement. She arrived mid-morning, her face contorted in self-righteous fury, wielding a stack of papers and her phone glued to her ear. "This is harassment," she screamed. "You're violating every community regulation, and I've called the police." My initial reaction was calm. I had dealt with Karen's theatrics enough to know that patience and preparation were the only defenses that worked. But what she didn't know was that the cabin in question wasn't merely a weekend getaway. It was actually part of a highly secure, classified operation. In fact, the location had been designated as an FBI black site for sensitive training and operations. Any uninvited intruder, let alone someone like HOA Karen who thought her authority could override federal law, was in for a very unpleasant surprise. As the police arrived, Karen waved her arms dramatically, insisting they needed to enforce her imagined violations. The officers approached cautiously, clearly unsure what they were walking into. Before she could start her usual tirade, I calmly walked to the front door and identified myself. "Officers, she has no jurisdiction here," I said. "Please proceed carefully." Their eyes widened slightly as they recognized the facility. Karen, meanwhile, had gone from overconfident to confused in seconds. She attempted to argue with the officers, citing rules and bylaws that didn't apply, but her words fell flat. Every claim she made was instantly contradicted by the site's security protocols and official signage. My wife, standing nearby, calmly documented the encounter, recording her escalating panic and the mounting evidence that Karen had overstepped every conceivable boundary. The situation reached its peak when Karen tried to push past the officers, attempting to enter the cabin despite explicit warnings. Within moments, the reality of her mistake became painfully clear. Her face turned pale as she realized she was dealing not just with local law enforcement, but with federal protocols that could easily result in detainment for trespassing on a restricted site. She stammered, sputtered, and finally attempted to backpedal, claiming she had no idea it was a secure location. The officers, trying to maintain professionalism, explained to her that her repeated false claims and aggressive attempts to assert control could have serious consequences. Karen's entire persona, once filled with self-assured authority, crumbled in seconds. By the time she was escorted off the premises, she was muttering threats about lawsuits and revenge, but it was clear no one was taking her seriously. After she left, my wife and I surveyed the aftermath. The officers had been courteous but firm, ensuring Karen understood that crossing the line into federal jurisdiction was no longer a matter of imagination. It was a serious legal boundary she could not ignore. Our cabin remained untouched, and the recordings captured Karen's dramatic meltdown in full detail, now a permanent record of her incompetence and arrogance. That incident reinforced a critical truth. HOA Karen thrived on intimidation, but she was completely unprepared for situations that required actual authority or legal knowledge. Every attempt to escalate trivial disputes turned into self-inflicted embarrassment. And while she likely told herself she had won by calling the cops, the reality was unmistakable. This was one HOA showdown she would never recover from. From that day forward, whenever Karen's name came up in conversation, it was always in the context of the time she tried to raid a federal black site over a minor perceived violation. Her reputation for overreach and humiliation only grew, and our family quietly celebrated another victory, knowing that patience, preparation, and a little legal savvy were more than enough to handle even the most aggressive HOA antics.